it kind of reminds me of Soul Calibur 3, where you follow up like this really like acclaimed sequel, and then you end up with a console exclusive game that ends up as the black sheep of the series. I think Street Fighter V is on track to be that in the future when we look back on it. Um, and I'm okay with that because if Street Fighter 6 is a solid like a solid increment or iteration over that, and I mean iteration as in they actually improve on it, which
Mhm.
every sign points to that, then I think Street Fighter 5 will be looked back on negatively, if anything. And I think I'm coming to terms with that. I think. Hello, hello, and welcome to the Absolute Guard podcast.
We're the podcast that chronicles the past and present of the fighting game community and bring on various perspectives from Arizona. You can find us on Twitch when we go live at twitch.tv/spiral series, on YouTube with the VOD at youtube.com/spiral series, and on Apple Podcasts and Spotify under Absolute Guard. This is episode 15. My name is Benny, also known as AK Grandmaster B, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host John, who is a software engineer, a video gamer, and a competitive Street Fighter V player. How you
Oh,
doing today, John?
pretty good. Is that my the Twitter banner, or is that the one on my Twitch? I don't remember which
That's the
one.
one. That's the one on the Twitch.
Nice, nice. Because I think I on the Twitter one I did add Absolute Guard. Absolute Guard podcast co-host. I think I
Yeah.
added that. So very cool. Yeah, actually, today you'll get to see some of the software engineering side of me. I'm kind of excited. I've been working on a project for a little while, and we're gonna unveil that today in our episode. But all that is new and exciting, and I was curious about what was new and exciting with you, Benny.
Well, for one, I just found out I got my the work schedule, the exact work schedule that I wanted. So of the available choices I had, so that's always good news to hear. Like, I don't know, it's whenever it comes to like shift bids at work, I'm always dreading like the worst. Like, it's so weird because it's like typically I'm like the really positive person. I was like, don't worry about it, it's okay. But then it's just like I don't know. I just think of all this doom and gloom, and I'm like, I'm never gonna see my family, and blah blah blah. And then it's just like, then you get that email, and it's just like, you got exactly what you wanted, and I'm like, yes.
You know that seems to be going around lately as far as like getting emails of exactly what you wanted, or maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, for some people.
Yeah, for folks who are listening in the future, we're talking about the Street Fighter 6 beta that is occurring tomorrow. Technically, it's starting tonight at midnight, and there's a lot of people throughout the Arizona scene who have received their codes, and so we're excited to talk about that stuff in the future. Kind of get in there, get the tech figured out. For me, in my case, do all the tech monster, lab monster stuff, and in other people's case, I think to actually play the video game. But I'm excited.
Yeah, people just want, yeah, they just want that hands-on experience, especially if they didn't go to Evo, or even if they went to Evo. It's that whole kind of new game vibe, and it's just like, hey, I got my hands on this, and get to go try things out.
There's something really special about when a new game comes out and it launches and everyone's learning it together, and you have like your training partners who are learning at the same speed as you, and you're just trying to throw stuff at each other and like riff off of each other and see if you can learn the game together. Lots of
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, yeah. The other thing with the beta too is like, yeah, there's probably going to be stuff in the game that's in there now, and then people are come launch time, they'll be like, why did they take this out, or why did they change this? So it'll be interesting to see that perspective too, because I know there was a lot of stuff. I think it was was it Ryu in Street Fighter Five that they changed a lot with. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
so,
They changed a lot of things between the betas. Um, I'm I'm actually pretty well versed in the Street Fighter Five beta. uh, but yeah, it was much more like Street Fighter Four when it first came when the betas first dropped. It was much more like jab, start your combos with jab, and go into um, link into strong into a special move.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so I had we to move on. We have a special episode today. You'll see that it's called the season one finale. So I kind of wanted to start with some podcast news about what a season one finale actually means. So we are on episode 15. We've been doing this 15 times now, with some Drinkcast episodes on the side with no guests, and we've also had like 8 or 9, maybe even more actual guests on the show. And we've gotten their perspectives and what was I trying to say there? Oh yeah, we really wanted to keep doing it because it's a lot of fun. So when we say season finale, that does not mean we're going anywhere, that we're even taking a break. We actually got together last week and decided that, yeah, we want to end the season, but more to recap what we have discovered so far in a visual format, as well as like kind of a recap episode like this. And so we're going to do that today and kind of go through like a visual representation. So if you're watching the YouTube video, like good for you because you'll be able to see it. If you're listening on video or listening on Spotify, rather, there is a video section on it. But if you're driving or something, please don't watch us. And we will do our best to narrate it and make sure it's enjoyable for the listener too.
Yeah.
So yeah. Other than that, oh yeah, so for the new season, right, we're gonna start right away. We're actually gonna start with a schedule change, I believe, right, Benny?
Yeah, we're gonna switch over to Tuesdays. I didn't really think that through when it came to switching to Thursdays, other than like we didn't want to be on Wednesdays, and then it was like, all right, Thursday's good, and then like football season started, and it was like I just wanted to watch the games on Thursday, so I was just like, let's go back to Tuesday.
Yeah. So, and like to our 7 viewers who are watching right now on the stream, we really appreciate you guys tuning in. With us changing the schedule so much. And we're gonna hopefully we'll stick with Tuesdays, but we appreciate your guys' flexibility.
Yeah, that could potentially open things up for some other guests that weren't available on Thursdays too. So it's just
Yeah.
like, yeah, so we'll see how that goes with that change going forward, and then yeah, definitely, I think that'll work out better for me for sure. But
Yeah.
yeah, when it came to the podcast, I think I mentioned this a few times, but one of the things I really wanted to do was kind of like really kind of document like the history of Arizona. Like it's something that I think I think I mentioned it too before. It was like that term of like giving flowers, and it's like it's something that's done like when somebody passes away, and then it's just like, hey, let's talk about the positive things that they've done. Let's talk to them, talk about the impact that they've had on us personally or on the community as a whole. And it's just like I don't want to wait till people pass to be like, oh man, so and so did this, and they were a great contributor to our community. Like, why not talk to them now? Get their perspective, get their word, and let them share with us their stories and their experiences and how things have gone for them over the years. So that's something that was real big for me and something that I wanted to, one of the main reasons I wanted to do this.
And I think that part of the process of like crystallizing that stuff is not just having people on to talk about it, but then continuing to create more episodes to like discuss it like in hindsight. Like we,
Yeah,
we heard a lot in the moment, like, and a lot of times we have a guest that like they'll jump around from different eras or talk about one game era and a different game era, and you won't know what year that was. And so like we wanted to try to see if we could organize all that stuff together and then kind of present that to you guys in almost like a top 10 list. Not really, actually, it's a top 3 list. So to kind of break down some of the mechanics here, what we've done is taken every notable event in the fighting game community that we have discovered so far on this show and then documented that and then put that in a visual format that we're going to show to you pretty soon here. It's split into 4 different eras because we have plenty of people who talk about Street Fighter 2, but then we also have folks who talked about Street Fighter 5, or people talking about CVS 2 in the middle there, or people like we just got done talking about Street Fighter 6, Tekken 7, Tekken 8, So like
yeah,
there's a wide variety of different events that have happened throughout our scene. And so we just wanted to kind of organize all that stuff, and we broke it into 4 different eras. And it's no small coincidence that they align a lot with the different Street Fighter releases that have come out, but I think that's kind of accepted by the global fighting game community.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I
Cool.
mean
So,
that's
sorry, go ahead.
I don't know. You're good.
Okay. So without a doubt, we're gonna go ahead and unveil this. Again, I've been kind of itching to show folks this for a long time here. This is the Absolute Guard timeline. So again, we have different events that have occurred throughout the Arizona FGC, and so what we're going to do is go through the different eras, and you'll see some examples of events that have happened, and like you can click on them, and then kind of it'll show us like where like what episodes they were in, and then you can link to them and stuff like that. But so for our show today, what we're gonna do is go through the different eras, and then each of me and Benny are gonna name our top three events. And when we say top three events, that doesn't necessarily mean most important events. It means the
Yeah.
events that we want to talk about the most.
Yeah,
Maybe
exactly.
something I found interesting, something that maybe like, hey, a friend of mine was like front and center here. I want to spotlight them, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So, I
yeah,
mean, so the initial era, the classic era that we have is basically like 1984 to 98.
yep,
We don't have a ton filled in for that point at this point, just because I mean we kind of barely touched the subject there with Jeff. But there's definitely probably some other people there that could give us some feedback or their stories about their experience during that time. I think for me with this particular era, I mean you got to hand it out to Street Fighter 2. Like it's you know arguably I think without a doubt the best sequel, the best game sequel, probably the best if you even want to put it in any kind of entertainment, whether it's movies or whatever, probably the best sequel ever in terms of like, where the original was and how people, it was kind of janky and whatnot, and the
yeah,
improvement to where two was and the kind of global phenomenon that it ended up uh becoming and just kind of literally starting like a whole like not a whole new genre, but just I guess optimizing it or refining it to a way that something that was more uh, easier to digest and easier to play.
I agree. Yeah, I think that the sequel completely outclassed the first one. Having as somebody who only played the first one like once, like
Yeah,
you could just tell looking at like the amount of depth and care and attention that they put into Street Fighter 2 and how much of a worldwide phenomenon it became.
yeah,
um, that kind of aligns with my first favorite event as well as has to do with Street Fighter 2, and it has to do with one of our guests, Luke's Balls, or Jeff slash Old Man River. He's got three different names on our show. um, but it's actually like this third one on the list here, where it was a release tournament for Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition. So it was right when the like it was after the world had had their initial taste of Street Fighter 2, and we're like that's when the people wanted to start playing competitively, and so like that seems to be like the earliest chronicled tournament in our scene, that Mesa Golfland tournament. So
yeah,
shout outs to Luke's Balls for that, and I consider that very very notable in our Arizona timeline here.
yeah. Like I mean, at the time for me, like when Street Fighter 2 came out, I how old was I? Man, maybe 10, was it 92 or 91? Yeah, I would have been
Anyone?
like 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm like, yeah, there was no way I was going to tournaments unless they were like at a mall or something and they just happened to be there. But there was, I didn't know about anything going on. Like it's so weird because like I remember looking in magazines and stuff and seeing like these like lists, and then it's just like I don't know, I just never kind of put all of it together.
Very cool, very cool. What's another notable event from this era for you?
For this one in particular, I'd probably say I don't know, I'd say hyper fighting or turbo, just because like to a lot of I guess Street Fighter too purist. Like for me, I know a lot of people like they like Super Turbo. That was like the introduction of like super meters and stuff like that, and something that was really kind of genre defying and different for a lot of people. But my personal preference is hyper fighting. I think that's the one that I have the most experience with. I played a lot of that on Xbox 360 when it was on their like arcade. I mean, it wasn't the best experience, but it's just like, hey, I honestly thought I was the only guy in Alaska playing, and I'd play one of my friends that actually lived here, and like there was like I don't know.
Yeah, I think with hyper fighting, an interesting story about that is that the Arizona guys in particular, like I guess everybody moved on to ST when that came out, and that became the de facto standard. But hyper fighting, a lot of Arizona folks kept playing hyper fighting because they believed it was a better game. So I think we got that history lesson from Jeff. I'm just not sure if it was on the show. um,
Yeah, That might have been in the initial one that we did, or like kind of like the when we talked to him
The pilot,
previously.
yeah, we did it like a dry run episode, yeah. Oh, actually, so earlier you mentioned, being 9 years old and not necessarily being a candidate for a tournament, right? And I was in the same boat. Like my parents probably like they wouldn't let me in the arcade, let me be in the arcade
Yeah,
unsupervised, or like,
yeah,
very very protective. So never really had that upbringing. But somebody who did have that upbringing was Scott, or
yeah.
Saber. And so, like, another notable event on our timeline here is in 1992. So it's another release tournament for Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition, but it's cool that they were happening basically on parallel sides of the Arizona scene. The
Yeah.
east side had Mesa Golf Land, and the west side had Metro Center. So Saber placed very high in his release tournament for Metro Center, but the most notable thing about this tournament, in addition to being so early, is that on his show, on the episode that he was on, he mentioned his mother pushed him into it. Like, I guess
Yeah.
one of the arcade operators was telling his mother like about it, and he didn't really care, but his mother was, kind of supported him and pushed him on this path. And that's like a recurring theme on our show, is that a lot of people were inspired by like um, mother or father figures, or in one case a grandmother figure. you know
Yeah.
so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely. Yeah, I definitely love seeing or hearing about those kind of stories because it's like, especially in my era growing up, like just video games have that kind of negative connotation. So to
Yeah,
kind of hear other people's kind of origin stories and be like, hey, I had somebody that was supportive, and just like not to say that my parents like hated it. It was just one of those things. Like it was just like to them, it was just like a hobby, and it was just like it wasn't anything to take serious. It was just me playing games and nowadays, like, you see all these kids on Twitch and it's funny, like I'll see some of my or even my friends would like be like, "Oh, you should be a professional streamer or a professional gamer." And I was like, "I don't want this to be my job."
sure.
And I
I
I
get
don't
you.
know, that's just how I've always felt. I always wanted to kind of separate the two and like I feel like it would kind of take away some of the joy.
Yeah, totally. Like there's some art in keeping things compartmentalized. I think that's something I'm thinking about in the coming days, even because like when Street Fighter 6 comes out, it's a new era, and it's you have to redefine like how much time in your life you're putting towards that.
I
um,
mean, it's a lot of work too. I mean, even just streaming regularly, keeping that schedule. Like I know a lot of people like you see some of these top streamers and they're just like, well, they just play games all day. How's your life hard? And I'm just like, you could
sure.
still have problems and still have like a cool job that pays you really well. Like
Yeah,
both things can be true. You know what I mean?
totally. Well, what is the your last event that you would like to talk about in this classic era here from
Well,
1984 to 1998?
I wouldn't say it's my favorite event, and I mean honestly, it didn't really necessarily really affect me, but I'd say kind of the release of Street Fighter 3 had to be kind of big because I mentioned it in one of our previous episodes where I remember seeing Street Fighter 3 kind of in like a side cabinet at the arcade that I went to. Because like you would walk in and you would see I think it was Soul Edge, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, I think it was Alpha, and then it was like one of the Marvel games, whichever one was active at the time. And then in the row of like all their other cabs, you'd see Street Fighter 3. And I was just like, you'd have to like be looking for it or kind of just walking by to see it. And for a lot of the community, like it was one of those games that people didn't really take to like initially. So I feel like, I mean, it kind of transitions well into the next era, like the dark era, because that's when when people were uh yeah, it wasn't well received at first, and it's just like
Yeah, they
it was
got rid of
something
all
that
the favorite characters, right?
yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
And it was another instance of like, new game comes out, not as good as old game that had been refined over X amount of versions. But the art was beautiful back then too. Remember seeing like how stylish it was.
Yeah.
There's a whole like series of documentaries that a YouTuber named Matt McMuscles does, that he did one on Street Fighter 3 that's got a lot of cool background information on the development of that game.
Oh really?
Yeah,
Nice.
it's stuff like it wasn't intended originally to be Street Fighter 3. It was just like because they were just pumping out fighting games at that point with different licenses like JoJo's and you know cyber bots and the Red Earth and stuff like that, right? And so it was like
Kinda-
they were just Darkstalkers and stuff. So they were eventually it was just like, all right, well, let's just make this a Street Fighter game. That's how
yeah.
it came to be. So there's a lot of good stuff in that video. But if I could just jump back to my last item for this era before we jump into the dark era, because again, I
Yeah.
agree that Street Fighter 3 kicked off that era. Um, my last item that I found interesting to talk about on our show was Karate Champ because, uh, like when we talk about what the first fighting game is, like realistically, nobody even said, like, a lot of people don't say Street Fighter 1 even. They say Street Fighter 2 as like that birth the genre, right? So I don't consider Karate Champ a fighting game. I know that sounds weird, but like it doesn't strike me as like the genre, like it doesn't fit in the genre that Street Fighter 2 started. And so to hear that from our two OG guests, Saber and Luke's Balls, then they were like, "Yeah, we played Karate Champ." Like it stretches the timeline from like 1991 seems like a decent stretch of time for this era, but it bumps it all the way back to 1984. It's like I wasn't alive in 1984. I didn't even know people were playing video games back then. So
Yeah,
yeah,
funny enough, like when it comes to Karate Champ, that was probably the game that I had more experience with in the arcade because like
really,
when
okay.
it came to Street Fighter 2, like Street Fighter 2, like it was kind of like a bowling alley thing. Like our dads would go out, the families go out to a bowling alley. They would play, the kids would play a couple games, and it's just like, hey, get the quarters from the mom. Hey, we're gonna go play in the cabs, and it was like the Street Fighter 2 was in that bowling alley, but the arcade of all arcades that I frequented the most happened to be a Chuck E. Cheese in Alaska. And they didn't have Street Fighter in Chuck E. Cheese, but they had Karate Champ. So occasionally, like, that'd be the game like I would just kind of gravitate to because, I'd be looking for whatever versus game. And that was like, there'd always be somebody there. And like, yeah, the controls, they were kind of not the best, the whole dual joystick thing and all this stuff, but yeah, that was something that I had probably more experience with just from the how much because Chuck E. Cheese was like one of the central places for like everybody to have their kids' birthdays in Anchorage. So,
Ah, I see.
um,
That's funny. Yeah, like that's like it kind of reminds me of that meme of like Mom, I want to play Street Fighter 2, and she's like, we have Street Fighter 2 at home, and it's Karate Champ. Because it's like, yeah, you play that game when the actual popular games are too busy, right? Like that's how I ended
yeah,
up playing Marvel vs. Capcom 1 at GameWorks, is because the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 cabinet was always busy.
yeah.
That's funny. That's funny. Okay, well
Oh, we
let's.
had.
Yeah,
I
should
was
we
gonna
move
say
on
we
to the
had.
next era?
I was gonna say we had Punker mention Yaya Kung Fu in here.
What's that?
Uh, that's actually something that Scott mentioned. Now that I think about it, I remember that too. Like I didn't play that in like any arcade or anything like that. I don't remember seeing that anywhere for myself personally. Um, that game I actually found, I think it was like the Wii Virtual Store or something. It just happened to be one of those games that was like on there, and I was like, it was like cheap. But that was one of the games that I think Saber talked about that we haven't included in the timeline yet.
What game was it?
The Yaya Kung Fu. I
Yayar
don't know if
Kung
I'm
Fu.
pronouncing there. Yeah,
Screw it. Let's just add it right now.
that's a very yeah, it's a very kind of
This is
I
that.
forget which
Oh, go ahead.
no, I forget which like console or what version I had that was like on the Wii Virtual Store. I want to say it was like Commodore or something.
What year did
I
it? What year did it come out?
want to say that was 85 too, 84. Excuse me.
All
Yeah, I
right.
don't know if you recognize the screenshots. I know, I remember, I know what he's talking about though.
All right. I'm not gonna do this for every new fact that we have from this show. This is taking way more
Filling it
more time
down.
than I thought. Yayar Kung Fu. Okay. That's just for you old guys. That's now added to our timeline. Let me refresh it here. Just for you old guys. There it is. All right. This is what being a software engineer does. So for our audio viewers, is we just updated it, and for there's a visual here, and we can. It's just a web page, so it's really easy to just change on the fly. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next era here. So we're calling it the Dark Era. And Benny, would you like to explain what the Dark Era is to our viewers?
basically, it was kind of a time when there wasn't, I guess, a lot of. Well, I guess I don't know.
There really weren't. There weren't. So like on paper, like a lot of people say that there weren't a lot of fight. There was a fighting game drought, and then you'll get the contrarians. You're like, well, Tekken was still being released at that time. 3D was still going
Yeah,
strong. Soul Calibur, stuff like that. But at least on the Capcom side and all the 2D fighting side, like it was pretty dry. Like even on the anime side, I don't think like there was the like all the really anime ones that some of them didn't even make it out of Japan. Like those games were still coming out, but like by and large, like there wasn't a lot. So we ended up with like three big games, I think, and that's kind of like what some of the first Evos were, which were CVS 2, Marvel 2, and Third Strike. Alpha
yeah,
3 is in there. Alpha 0 is in there. The series is in there, but 0 is weird where it kind of falls in this gap between these two eras. And so, like, 0 was starting to, like, fall out of play, I think, around that time. And then anime was on the rise. Like Guilty Gear, I think, took a lot of inspirations from Alpha 3. So, like, air blocking and stuff like that. So, uh, drought, basically, the community was shrinking rather than growing, which was a first,
yeah,
right? And something that I
yeah,
don't think you or I are familiar with at all as far as shrinking
yeah.
FGC.
That's not something that that's kind of what I was thinking of more in terms of like just the fact like the community in some ways was shrinking or not as big as it was, right? Because like
Right.
Jeff was talking about like the Street Fighter 2 or even Scott was talking about the Street Fighter 2 launch tournaments and there being like 100 plus people there and I imagine like as things went on and like people lost interest in or when Street Fighter 3 and other games came out that that wasn't there anymore.
Okay. Yeah, and I see some folks in our chat saying that CVS 2, like after CVS 2's release, would technically be the dark era. So there's a lot of like give and take I think we can put with these years, and maybe we'll revise that in the future.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so what would be your the first event in this era that you'd want to talk about, Benny?
Um, I would probably say Third Strike. I mean, that's it's kind of early in that timeline, and I feel like that's a big moment because one, that's one of the games that's very popular nowadays, right? It has really kind of a in some ways kind of a cult following when it comes to Street Fighter because like a lot there's people that don't aren't good at the game or whatever, and they'll just be like, "This is the best fighting game ever." For it's got the Evo moments, 37, and it's one of those games that like in some ways brought people back to that game because it was after it was the third iteration of Street Fighter 3, and it was after they had made a bunch of changes, um, basically to kind of appease the community in a way from what wasn't working. So, and in some ways, like I don't know if I wouldn't say it's the most popular game, but it's one of the most popular in terms of like whether people love it or hate it or
Yeah, yeah. Like when it came out, Third Strike, not even Street Fighter 3. We talked about Street Fighter 3 and how it bombed because it didn't have a lot of the legacy characters and a lot of the legacy fun stuff that people liked in ST, or just in Street Fighter 2. But Third Strike in particular, I think people it bombed harder because it like people thought it was ugly and it didn't have any depth, and they were already hating on Street Fighter 3, and there were other games out like CVS 2 and Marvel 2 that were out. And then I think we got this from Luke's balls, and we got this from Saber. Luke's balls. I'm just calling him Jeff from now on. We got this from Jeff, and we got this from Scott. But there was a match in 2001, I believe. No, 2002. Here we go, 2002, where it was called like the Third Strike Revival. And so like I thought it was Evo Moment 37 that brought Third Strike back and then kind of revitalized Third Strike briefly, but it turned out it was that again America had not known about what was top tier in Third Strike or how to play the game really, and then Tokido comes over and then messes Justin up, and it starts this whole trend of like maybe there is more to this game than we thought, and then Evo Moment 37 happens the year after that, and it just kind of snowballs from there and grows a little bit.
yeah,
So
exactly. I mean, yeah,
yeah,
it's one of those moments where like it's you don't really understand like kind of the depth to the game or certain things that might be broken or somebody reveals to you and it's just like, oh, this is how the game's supposed to be played or this is what
yeah,
we're missing out on. So definitely opens up. Uh, opens up, I guess the whole game to people, or like a whole new game within a game kind of situation.
Yeah. My first moment also had to do with Third Strike. Specifically, it had to do with Rock, because our episode with Rock was so much fun to talk with him about it. I don't know what it is about that guy and his infectious personality, but like, um, he described Third Strike as art, and I thought that was a really interesting way to describe it, and like how like there's a flow to it, and how there's kind of a I don't know, there's like a sophistication to that game, and I'm not a Third Strike head by any means, but I did try to learn how to play that game, and I can kind of understand where they're coming from because of like the parry system allows you to basically express yourself in so many different ways. It's completely busted. It
Yeah,
actually it makes the game less fun for me, but
yeah.
it's a very expressive expressive tool. Um,
Yeah, like I said, it's definitely one of those like the most polarizing games because like I think I've seen James Chen talk a lot about it where he just says like this is like the most Street Fighter game or something like that.
yeah,
And it's like it's true because it's like, you took a game like Street Fighter 2 what was heavy on fireballs and footsies and zoning and stuff like that. And like, not to say that there's not footsies in Third Strike, but like, the parry system really kind of flips everything on end. It's just like fireballs, now you get meter gain instead of it, oh, this is to lock somebody down, those kind of situations. But at the same time, it's like, um, I see that whole side like where Saber is, and I'm kind of in that same boat where like I love watching stuff, the parry system opens up all kinds of amazing opportunities, right? But at the same time, it locks you out as a player from doing a lot of things too. And it kind of like, you kind of have to have a whole different mindset to play that kind of game.
yep, I agree. So what's another event from this dark era that you found interesting to talk about, Benny?
Um, the one with Rick in terms of like running tournaments,
Yeah.
he talked about it kind of being a selfish endeavor in terms of like, wanting to be the best, wanting to find other people to play his favorite game with. And, as a TO myself, like, and I think everybody kind of does their, you have to have, I think everybody kind of has selfish reasons for doing something, whether it's kind of be in the boat that Rick is, where I just want more people to play my game, or whether it's, whatever your reason is really. But that's I think that was a big stepping stone in terms of like just the local community, in terms of like getting things organized, getting people to, because he was saying they were running tournaments like out of his house, doing those
Yep.
kind of things. That's a huge change from like kind of the arcade era, and kind of moving into kind of growing the community outside of that.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. To the point where like it was actually my next event as well was talking about Rick running tournaments. It's actually interesting that throughout this entire podcast, we've interviewed a bunch of different TOs, like a bunch of different ones, and we always seem to come to that answer of like, why are you doing this? And every TO like seems to have had a different answer. They all have that same theme of selfishness that Rick established out of the gates, right? But like you know I think of Daniel when I think of somebody who wants to spread their game, right? I think when for Rick, I think of somebody who wanted to get really good as a player, but needed to create more situations to make that happen.
Yeah.
Um, in your case, like it was a timeliness thing and wanting to optimize a process that you thought was flawed. Um,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and then in my case, like I think I've been building to that over the past couple episodes in particular, but like it was about like belonging to a community and feeling like you could create an environment for people to belong in. Um,
Yeah.
so like there's so many different cool reasons why people began running tournaments or became TOs, and um, I think it all kind of stems from Rick's wise words in this event here. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned me like wanting to optimize a process, because like, yeah, that was my selfish reason, is because like, the tournaments that I was participating in were running along, and like thinking about it now, like when you said that, it was just like, what, even when I run tournaments now, like my first thought is like a lot of the inspiration comes after I attend somebody else's event. And not to say that I think there's positive, negative feedback from any event that you go to. But like I've helped out at like the undefeated events here with our Angelic, with Armando, and helped out at Rewired with Nick in Tucson. And it was usually after those events where I was just like, I feel I could do this better, or I could do this portion of it better, and like that would kind of inspire me to want to go do something else.
In a lot of ways, that's like the American dream, right? It's like, hey, here's I think like every a lot of businesses start that way. It's like this
Oh
thing
yeah,
I could
true,
do it
yeah,
better. I could do it
yeah,
cheaper.
yeah, exactly. I could do it cheaper, or this the quality of this thing is crap. I could make a better one,
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah, that's kind of kind of where I am a lot of times when it comes to running events. So what
totally.
about the next event for you in this timeline? Because I know that, yeah, like you said, there's definitely a lot of overlap. We didn't discuss this beforehand. Like we didn't
Oh
like
yeah, this is cool
talk
actually.
about this.
It's very organic. I would actually put to keep in the TOing theme. I put Frank AZHP's founding of Arizona Hobbyist Paradise. Frank, I haven't talked with Frank for I don't know, probably like at least 5 years, at least probably closer to 10. And you know, he and I actually had more in common than I originally thought, because I actually have similar roots as far as like starting with having a fan site. I had a video game fan site for the Game Boy game Golden Sun, and I had a bulletin board system for it. And so when Frank started talking about that on his episode about how he had a bulletin board system, it kind of brought back all these different like memories of like, oh, what was it like to manage a community, like be a mod. And I was a 13-year-old kid at the time. So like I wasn't as like I guess I didn't have a big leadership presence compared to Frank at that time, who was actually like organizing con events, like conventions and stuff. But
Yeah,
to hear like how you know that Wild West era of the internet influenced his path as her tournament organizer was really cool. And like it interwove with my experience as a tournament organizer. I don't know why I just did this on the stream. To the people listening to audio, I just made a funny thing with my hands like this. But yeah, like to your point earlier, Benny, like his events also inspired me to improve different aspects of my events, and I think we fed off each other quite a bit. Yeah,
I'd have to agree. Like in terms of the, I was thinking more with even with Neff's events too. It's just like it's one of those things like a lot of people don't know about the fighting game community, and any kind of event or anything that will introduce them uh, to it in a way is, it's a big stepping stone. It really is, because like,
yeah,
it's one thing to see an ad for a game, a YouTube video for a game, but then it's just like, oh, this is part of some other event, or this is part of like a tournament, and it's just like, it opens those people's eyes to like a whole another area of the game. You know what I mean? And it's just
yeah,
like it's the same thing. I mean, if you look about it in terms of like uh any game really, like whether it's a first person shooter or watching StarCraft, it's like, oh, I love StarCraft, and then it's just like, oh, what's this? Oh, this is part of like a huge tournament, and it's just
yeah,
like, I didn't know that that even existed. You
yeah. You got to
know,
be
that sitting at home
some.
playing ladders or whatever.
Yeah, someone's got to be the front door to the actual community, right?
Yeah.
That's super
So
cool.
I'd agree. Like, yeah, the AZHP thing and like, the con tournaments and stuff that he was doing, it introduces people to the games themselves, and then like a whole other arena in terms of like movements, and like that there's a community of people that just play these games, or focus on playing these games in a manner that some people uh aren't aware of, because like you
Yeah,
see, you know some people know how to throw Hadokens, and they're like, oh cool, I feel great, and then it's like you fight somebody else, and then like they pull off this like crazy combo, and you're like, you could do that, like
yeah. Like even within the fighting game community, I'm like, I didn't really have a connection with anime games at all, but I think those con tournaments actually helped expose me to a lot of that stuff. So
yeah.
yeah, that was I think I went through all three of mine: Third Strike, Rock, Frank, AZHP, and Rick. I think did you go through all 3 years for this era?
But yeah, I was just mine was the third one was basically
Got it.
just the NEF, the UAP stuff. Because I was kind of on the same wavelength, like in terms of like thinking of like the greater community. Because it's like, again, it's one of those things. It's just like if you went to
Got it.
UAT, it's like, sure, you might know about the fighting games, but did you know about this side of fighting games?
Got it. Got it. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense for sure. Alrighty then. So we'll move on to the next era. So again, we leave the dark era. Eventually something has to end the dark era because the community was shrinking, but then it had to explode and grow and continue to grow to this day. And that was with the release of Street Fighter 4 and what we have lovingly entitled the Revival era. So Street Fighter 4 came out in 2008, and it kicked off so much as far as growth in our community, bringing new people like Benny and myself into the community. And all these events started happening, and so you'll actually find that on the timeline, this is the one of the chunkiest ones. There's a lot of different events here to talk about.
I mean, I guess for me, like, I definitely have to just start with like the release of Street Fighter 4 because for me,
Sure.
that was a huge moment just because like one, I wasn't really into to Third Strike. Like I had seen clips in here and there, but I had kind of just I'd really just been playing hyper fighting on 360, and then it was like, oh, Street Fighter 4 is coming out. I'm like, what? There's a new game coming out. So
Yeah.
just just kind of being hyped for that. Like I think, and where it's led the scene now, like that would probably be the first thing that I think of when it comes to kind of this era.
I remember when Street Fighter 4 first came out, and or not, didn't it hadn't come out yet. HDR came out, and I was like really into it, and I was like, oh shit, Street Fighter 4 is coming out. Street Fighter 4 is already out in Japan, and then I ended up looking on YouTube videos for these 140p, giant red blob blocks fighting each other, YouTube quality videos of Street Fighter 4. I remember I was so interested in Viper versus Ryu, that particular match. I forget who the players were, but I was just so interested in that, and I just was all the way up into release. I was following the game, and then eventually, buying fight sticks and stuff. So yeah, you're correct in that. I think that this is a huge landmark for a lot of people's lives. You can actually see it on the event in our timeline here, that it's got so many different players we've talked to on our show that have been associated with Street Fighter 4. Um,
Yeah,
it, it's a big deal. Street Fighter 4 was a
yeah,
big deal.
yeah,
Um,
definitely it was.
yeah. Yep. Yeah, I actually, so in a weird twist of fate, my first event in this era has also to do with Neff. In that, a lot of those first tournaments that I attended were at UAT, and I think that the bridging of the UAT QCF community or club with the greater fighting game community, and that marriage helped me join the community. So yeah, Neff president of QCF is like a significant moment on the timeline for me in particular.
Nice, nice. So that would be you consider that like the second one after the Street Fighter 4, or I mean, I guess I don't know if you want to like rank them, but
Yeah, I actually didn't even have Street Fighter 4 on my list because I knew you were going to talk about it. There's no way we were not going to talk about Street Fighter 4. But yeah, so the second one on my list is well, actually, do you want to go next? I already just
well,
dumped one.
yeah, well, I would say for me, the second one was that was just me starting to play competitively. So that was in
Got it.
2009, and like for me, that's just that's a huge moment in my life because it's just like one, finding out about the FGC, and then the I had my first tournament. I talked about that before, where I heard about it on the radio. I went, I found, I looked at their website. I recognized somebody on the website as somebody that worked at FedEx, and that was my my icebreaker with them. Like I had never talked to the dude before, and I was just like, "Hey, I saw you on this website for this Street Fighter tournament. Like, are you gonna go to the next one?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah." And that was like, I go to the tournament. Then of all things, like, I mean, I wasn't necessarily cocky, but I didn't feel like anybody knew how to deal, how I played. So I was like, I felt confident,
I still don't know how to deal
and
with it.
and I got second place. I lost to like a Zangief who like punished everything that I did, and like I'd never really played against a Zangief like that. And and in all honesty, like that moment in itself, just going to that first tournament, like it was big for me because like getting second, like I felt like I belonged, but at the same time, I felt humbled at the same time because I was like, okay, I could do this, but there are definitely people that are better than me at this too. So it's like the whole um Alex Valle Daigo thing, right? When it came to Alpha 3. Like Daigo came over and beat him, and here he was thinking like he was the best thing, Mr. Street Fighter. And he gets
Yeah.
kind of and he's talked about that too. Like, I don't know what I would have done if I got first place. I might have just been retired and been done. But after I lost to Daigo, it was like I realized that there were better players out there, and it wasn't like I wasn't the top guy. So I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know where I would have been if I got first place. I mean, I would have been like, you know what, these guys can't handle me, and I could have been done. Because there was actually a guy in our Alaska scene. He's that came in and like got first place in a couple tournaments, and then like he never came back. And like people are like salty about it because they're just like, man, I wanted to have my run back against him. And he's just like, nah, you guys aren't worth my time. And you're just like, man,
Uh,
and like
that doesn't
so who
happen
knows
in
where I would have
Arizona.
been. But that was, for me that it's a big moment, and like and also like just the people that I ended up meeting there, like there's I'm friends with a lot of those people to this day. So that would be my second moment in this particular era.
Your
So what
friends be
about you?
you're friends with them because you beat them?
Oh no, just just in the community, and just like there you go, you know.
Yeah, I get you. I actually have a similar story. It's not that wasn't on my list, but just to tangent briefly is like the GameStop National Tournament that's actually on this timeline as well. That was my first tournament for Street Fighter 4 and first tournament in general. And it's same exact thing, Benny. I got second place, and I lost to a Honda player, but he was not really a Honda player. His name's Roy, Hitman Striker, who's one of the big third strike heads in our Arizona scene, and he was the one who told me like, "Hey, we play competitively. Like there's this whole scene. There's a whole bunch of us. Like I asked him all those questions and stuff because I was just really into it, and I had been lurking SRK. So shout outs to Roy if you ever listen to this. And yeah, and then from there it was like a journey with talking to Reese. They got me into the actual scene, but sorry, that was a brief tangent. But to kind of think more about what the general scene was like. I want to move forward in time to past Street Fighter 4. My event that I'm one of the most events that sorry, I can't talk. One of the events that I'm most excited about was SCR 2014 because it had significant high placing results from multiple players in our scene, but also on our show. Like there are like, or rather, it's the other way around. On our show, like Saber, Rock, and King Hippo all got top 8 at a major, and that specific major. And King Hippo in particular talked all about the support that he got from the community because everybody was like, they're on cloud nine, they're doing really well. It's Team Arizona, and yeah, like that that notion of everybody at a major supporting each other is just that's something magical that we've talked about numerous times on this podcast. So I thought that's a good like crystallization of that kind of feeling in our timeline.
Yeah, because I mean, yeah, I would say that um, those were pretty big moments too. Just because, like, I feel like I mean, I've only been part of this scene basically since 2012, and I feel like uh, just from a kind of outsider perspective, like the biggest moment up until like like the 2014 time that you said was the Latif moment in 2011. Him getting second place in was it Arcade Edition, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was my first Evo. That's a huge moment for me because that was my first Evo, you know, I ever went to, and then to see Latif do his thing there, and then again like knowing that I was eventually going to be coming to this scene, and knowing that there were players like of that caliber, like that was a really big thing. And like we talk about the support of the people at majors, and like um, when I was going to Evo, that was something that I always tried to do, whether it was in the AZ group or in my um, Alaska Gamers group, would be to reach out to people and ask them about the pool info and what games that they were playing. And one thing I always did is I made a spreadsheet, and I even
Yeah.
like printed them out because like the everybody's phone reception inside Evo or whatever majors, it's terrible. So I made hard copies. I printed a bunch of spreadsheets out with like everybody's pool time, what pool station they were going to, what games that they're playing. So that way it's just like, hey, at 10 o'clock, where's everybody at? And like, you know, we'd gravitate together and be like, okay, well, I'm gonna go check out so and so, he's playing Tekken. Okay, well, I'll be here at the Street Fighter station. And then come noon, hey, where's everybody going? Who's gonna watch what? And like everybody would split up and go support their friend, whoever as part of the community, um, at the various places. So like yeah, when I was hearing Tanner King Hippo talk about that situation where it was just like he was in top 8, and then all of a sudden it was just like, oh, all these guys are here to support me. Like that's kind of the thing. Like I remember moments like that where it's just like, oh, so and so's in top 8, we should go over there. And like, bunch of us, like even if we didn't even play the game, right? It was just like, hey, he's one of us.
Yeah,
And that had to be a moment, like, I'm sure, like, I mean, obviously he remembers it, so had to be a pretty big moment for him.
totally. Yeah. I just to tangent again briefly is that I have been a benefactor of those spreadsheets of those like organizations of like, hey, we're going to Evo, everybody post up your pools so we can have a cheering squad at all points in time. And I've carried that. I tried to carry that forward for our existing Street Fighter V scene right now, and instill that in some of the newer guys. One of my
But,
favorite memories of your organization to support at Evo was a match that I played on Capcom Fighters. I was like me versus somebody from Korea, and I qualified out of my pool that year. That was the first year that Street Fighter V came out, and then like the actual like all that stuff is just like tournament bullshit. But the actual like notable piece of it is that your daughter made me a piece of fan art saying
oh yeah,
congratulations
that's
for
right.
getting out of the pool. And so since we're doing a visual episode this time around, and again apologies to the audio viewers, I'm currently showing on stream a picture of the art that Kaya made for me. I forget. It
Yeah.
was a 2016 now. I bet this is probably really embarrassing for her. So
That's
that was 6 years ago at this point, right? So she
yeah.
drew my character. The character I played Karen, and Karen was using an alternate costume, and she drew everything on there. So that's the kind of support you get from your scene. It's so cool.
Yeah, I had no idea she was doing those at the time because she had judged one up for me too of like Dawson.
Yeah, that's so cool. Oh man.
Nice,
All right.
nice.
So yeah, I kind of went way off topic as far as our top three events here. So I think I named two. And have you named all three of yours or
Well, no, I was agreeing with you in terms of like the
got it?
SCR stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So what's your next one then?
Uh, what you mean for the next era?
Oh no, next event or in this era. So like in the revival era, like what would be another one that you think was cool?
Oh, another one. Oh, for me in particular was the because my three were basically Street Fighter 4 was
Okay.
then me playing competitively, and then I was agreeing with you in terms of like the SCR stuff. But
Oh, I see. Okay. I get you.
yeah, but if I had to name one more, I would say um, Saber's soccer moment at Evo. Like
Oh yeah. Yeah.
that was just a huge moment for me because again, it was like that was when streams were first coming around, and like I had just been starting getting into the scene. I just found out about Evo, and then tuning into that stream and the exhibition, and like wanting to see all these players that everybody knew like the top here and there, but then like that exhibition I think really kind of put a lot of people on the map literally, and it was just like for me that was just seeing that, and like I said, I had tried to learn about the lore of Street Fighter and like the fighting game community, right? And Valle was that dude. So to see somebody go up and to like do that to him, that was just like holy shit. And I'm like, oh, this guy's from Arizona too, and I'm just like, wow, you know what I mean? That was a really really big thing for me to see, and to like I said, coming here, like it wasn't intimidating, but it was just like, man, there's players that are like this. That this is the scene that I'm going to.
I'm pretty sure that everybody in our scene that has seen that video at some point went, "Oh shit, I live near that guy." Oh man, that's a landmark moment for Arizona, I think, and I wholeheartedly agree to the point where it's still getting rehashed in YouTube videos to this day. Oh man. Speaking of YouTube videos, my final event in this era, again, this is the revival era, would has to do with YouTube. Unfortunately, the channel that this person put together is no longer available for us, but it held a lot of memories. And that's Team Hazmat running our tournaments, FGC tournaments. And
Mhm.
um, to kind of go through this one in particular, this podcast like has always been about chronicling the FGC, and uh, there's good things and bad things that have happened in our scene. And so for Team Hazmat in particular, like I was part of that team, and I didn't part with that team on good terms. I think a lot of people didn't. I think Tanner was, or King Hippo was actually pretty upfront about some of his the ending of his relationship with that in that era. Um, and so like that was an extremely difficult thing to talk about and trying to figure out how to parse all that stuff. And so like shout outs to King Hippo and to Nam for being able to bring that to the podcast. Out of the gates, like we knew we would have to work our way up to that because there's still a lot of things to unpack about that era, like what those casuals were like, all the different events that happened, and like there's a whole subset of like Marvel players I think we're gonna be I'd love to talk to at some point on our show here. Um,
Yeah.
but it was such a hard, challenging topic for this podcast in particular, and I was like, we got to work our way up to this, and that's why we waited so long
Yeah.
to bring it up. Um, so like, eh, as far as like a landmark moment for our show, as well as for this scene, just to be frank, like
Yeah.
this Team Hazmat carried the Arizona scene on its back for a very long time.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's a huge part of the scene in terms of like exposure, in terms of like of growth. I mean, I know early on, like when that started, like I wasn't really involved in the scene just because of stuff outside of my control. But yeah, it was definitely something that was very big. I think in terms of like the growth and the growth of the community, Marvel. Yeah, I'm sad to see that like the channel was taken off because I think I even looked it up like even last year and I remember still finding stuff for it and I was just like, oh shit, this
same,
is still up here
yeah,
because like there was yeah, actually my moment when I came here, I think it was at the Hasbats. It was at one of those I think the first Ranbat of that second season or something, and like I didn't download those VODs or like, that was me coming here and like everybody like, oh, who the hell's this guy? And like I
yeah.
had beat I wanted to download those clips or have those clips like Nick said in terms of like, things to look back on and like, yeah, this is when I came in and like put everybody on notice kind of thing.
Yeah, and to
And
that end,
like,
like that underscores our reasoning for even doing this podcast in the first place, right? Is we gotta keep track of this stuff. I go
yeah,
back and watch a
exactly.
lot of my old videos a lot too, and unfortunately, a lot of like the cool victory moments were on Team Hazmat's channel, and so I hope that um, they are still somewhere, and that maybe we'll see them again someday.
Sure.
Yeah. So,
Yes.
any final remarks on this particular era, which is again, this was the revival era. So we talked about Street Fighter 4 and all the way up to SCR 2014 here.
No, I was just those are gonna be probably my last one was just the hazmat or even like the Rick Dog tournaments in terms of like him running tournaments here because that was like the first time that I had joined the scene was back in 2010
Yeah,
um, at one of the Ranbats here. Like I just
yeah,
happened to be I was taking a vacation to check the place out and it was just like, hey, you guys running an event and it's just like you guys just happened to have a Ranbat going on that weekend that I was here, so I was just like ended up going and not doing well that day, but at least getting my my feet wet and introducing myself.
yeah. I think I met you that day too, if I recall correctly.
Yeah,
That was at one of the pizza places that
yeah, the
like
pizza or the Subway shop or whatever it
yeah,
was in Awatsuki.
yeah, very cool. Yeah, circa 2010 for that.
Yeah.
Oh man, if I could gush a little bit more about that, I don't know if SNK is still in our chat or still watching here, but another thing that happened during that time period was it was when Super came out, and then I was still learning how to play fighting games, but I figured out how to gimmick people out with a Ibuki, and I beat Scott and I beat SNK with my Vortex, and me being the awkward player that I am, and not knowing like social norms and stuff, I was like, hey SNK, who I had just beaten. Hey, what do you think I could do better? That was the worst thing you could ask anybody after you just beat them. And he was just like, "You just beat me. What the hell do you want?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." And I learned a lot of social cues through the fighting game community, and that was partly through Rick Dog's tournament. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
oh man, I remember SNK was watching our stream earlier, so I wanted to shout him out. He's been mentioned multiple times on our stream too. He was in King
Yeah,
Hippos.
yeah,
Okay, let's move on to the modern era. So 2014 is over. Now 2015 happens, and that's when I think the Street Fighter 5 beta started happening, all the buzz around that. So kind of like the era we're in right now with Street Fighter 6, where Street Fighter 5 is kind of doling out, and it's kind of fizzling out, and we're getting ready for the next game. That's when this era starts, basically.
yeah. So what would you say would be the first moment you think of with this particular era?
Scrub Cup. This one right here.
Scrub Cup, really?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's significant because we talked about it a lot on our show. So it's significant to you and I in particular because we worked on it. So there's some nepotism there.
Yeah.
But the big thing is like it defined. I don't want to say defined, but it helped. It helped like motivate one of our really strongest Street Fighter Five players, Thrasher. And I
Mhm.
talked about that on our podcast, and then it got extra meta because I saw him later that day, and then I mentioned it to him, and then he started listening to it and stuff like that. So like it's kind of this weird feedback loop. But that day was just super cool because nobody had done anything like that in the in time that I had been part of the FGC in Arizona, and
Yeah.
like it's really it's just really hard to do an event like that when it's based on something subjective like who should be banned. And we had you and I had
Yeah.
our conversation in a previous episode about the methodology around that but um it was just different enough to be that memorable. I guess that's probably the cap on that.
Yeah. No, it's like yeah. I mean, that honestly was one of my top three moments. I mean, just for to
Totally.
my own horn, but it was just like it was again. It was just one of those things. Like yeah, there was some adversity to people not liking the name, and understandably so. I mean, for me, I'm an old head, and like I'm just like whatever. Like we're all scrubs anyway. Like you know, like check your ego at the door and whatever. That's just me. So
Yeah.
I didn't think anything of it, but you know, uh, there was some people that didn't like the name. But besides that, the concept was to eliminate the people that were generally consistently winning, and to take those people out of the equation to give other people their shine. And yeah, I will take credit for the rise of Thrasher because
But oh, go ahead.
yeah, because like I felt like I mean, who knows where he would be if he didn't have that moment to kind of shine and be put in that kind of pressure cooker and be in grand finals and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So
I,
it was one of the most fun things for me to watch in this local community was to like just see all the hype that was happening in the room and people just rooting for each other and just like for people that you didn't see regularly in that position because
yeah,
normally it ended up being a lot of our Ranbats were like Phoenix versus Tucson at the end or whatever, right? And it's
sure.
just like, oh yeah, let's go Yusef, let's go Akita, blah blah blah, and there's all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
like, I mean, it did end up being Phoenix Tucson because it was him and Carlos, the Range Tyrant, were the grand finalists. But it didn't get down to that, right? It wasn't like, oh yeah, let's go Tucson. It was like it was just those two players in that moment, and it's like whoever you were rooting for amongst those two as who they were.
I remember there was a player in the Tucson fighting game community at that time, and she had just started learning how to play fighting games, and she was a big Jury fan. Her name was Guts and
Lurker.
Glory. That was her tag, but also Lurker von Lurkerberg. There's a lot of different. She's a lot of different cool creative names there. Brilliant artist. But she, didn't she went 0-2 a lot of times. She didn't get a lot of limelight. And so there was one match that she got to be on the stream, and she did pretty well if I recall correctly. And like there were some big combos in there, and so she got a little taste of the nerves on the stream. All of us like were cheering her on. So like I think there actually was a Tucson cheering squad behind her, if I recall correctly. So just to kind of tie in with your story there, it was a good time. It was a good time.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Actually, the VOD for that is on the YouTube channel that our podcast is on. So if you're watching this on YouTube, just hop on over
Oh
to
yeah,
that
that's right.
channel.
Yeah, that's right. Because you did all the stream layouts. Like, yeah, you had the little.
Yeah,
I remember you took one of my like headshots somewhere and used it as like a emote or icon or
yeah.
something.
Gotta have some personality. And like it's really worth noting is that nothing like that has been done since then because the criteria for it is so hard. It's like you got to have a scene that can withstand banning the top 10 players in it. And a lot of scenes are like 30 people, so you don't want to ban a 30-year scene, right? And then you also got to have the like the group think of like being okay with a list of bans and all the controversy that comes with that. So I don't think anyone's done anything like that since then. So
Yeah, no, there hasn't been. I mean, I've definitely thought about it in terms of like Street Fighter Five, or even like, I mean, we'll see where Street Fighter Six is, but I mean, we had COVID and 2 years of nothingness going on, so it's just like, we'll see where things go with Street Fighter 6 first, and then if the scene's big enough, and if again, it'll probably just be one of those. I'll probably just
A
end up
one-off.
doing a similar. Well, no, just a similar kind of like cutoff the way that I did in terms of like people getting top eight or something like that. It's just a real simple hard line to just be like, have you made a top eight? Okay, well, you can't play in this tournament, so sorry.
That's
But
the
I
other
mean,
hard part though is like you have to wait till the game's mature enough for their actual results, right? So you can't even
yeah,
do it for Street
exactly.
Fighter 6 until like maybe a year in.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it's such a unique lightning striking situation. But okay, so that was your number one or your first event as well. Then, so do you want to give us your number two?
Well, my number one was actually the Rewired
Oh,
in terms of
Rewired.
Driftwood, because like
Okay.
just going, because I was looking at it like kind of just going down the timeline. So for me, like Rewired, that's something that hits very personal for me, and for me, and I think it was real big for our scene in terms of what Nick was trying to do in terms of just kind of putting Tucson on the map, and trying to have our own kind of little thing here. And I don't know, for me that's just an event like the second one probably more so than the first, but just the fact that he was trying to do something big here. And when it comes to whether it's him or whether it's Angelic doing undefeated, like in some ways I feel kind of obligated to help people out when it comes to kind of throwing those kind of regional kind of tournaments, because to me that's my way of kind of giving back to the community, like whether I don't have to participate, but hey, do you need help with registration? Do you need help with setup? Do you need help running brackets? Whatever. Like, let me know what I can do to help you out, and help make this easier for you. Like that's just something personal for me that when people run events like that, that's something that I'm looking to do.
And that's not just you either. That's your entire family. I remember you telling me that for undefeated, at least 1 year in undefeated, at least, like your daughters were putting that as community service hours, right? Um,
Well, no, that was at the second Rewired. They were running the reg table with Mary, and
yeah,
you know, doing registration, selling balls and T-shirts and stuff like that, and then
yeah.
undefeated to actually help run some brackets and stuff when I got busy. So there's definitely involvement in other things that I was doing too.
So rewired is actually twice on this timeline that we've got here. Where again in 2015 is when Driftwood first founded it or co-founded it with his partner, who was a figurehead in the Smash community, and combined those two communities together in Tucson. And then so they ran Rewired in 2015, and then they ran a second one in 2016. And
Yeah,
that's the other one that's on here. And selfishly, I put because I did mention this on our podcast. I forget which one. I think it was one with Nick on it. Actually, we talked about like some of our top moments. This was up
yeah,
there
yeah,
for me. I think I got fourth. I think I got fourth in this one.
yeah.
Yeah. I lost to Kyle Spurlock and Thrasher. Thrasher. And then I beat a bunch of people. Like to be, I don't want to trumpet that one, but I beat a lot of people that I don't think people thought I would. So that was
Yeah.
pretty fun. I also have a placing in undefeated. I got second in undefeated 2016, I think, and I lost to Snake Eyes and
Yeah, the Snake
only
Eyes, yeah.
him, I think. So
Yeah,
that
I
was
think
cool.
yeah, I think that was right,
Or
yeah.
I lost to Ray Ray as well, but I beat him in winner losers finals, so it worked out. Um,
Ah, gotcha.
but yeah, so like I've got some calendar nodes on here. Those aren't actually selfishly are not on my list though. I have another one if I could get into that one.
Yeah,
It's not my tourney results. It's actually Nom's tourney results because um, we talked about it very very briefly on the podcast, and he he's really a humble guy. He was just like, yeah, I traveled for a little bit and had a good time, but in gathering the act of gathering the data for this podcast, I asked Nam about like where did you go and how many top eights did you get, and in the timeline between 2018 and 2019, those 2 years, he went ham. So like for 2018 when Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite came out, he got seventh at NCR, fifth at Undefeated, fifth at CEO, seventh at Pasadena Regionals, third at SCR, and fifth at CEO Taku. That's 1 year of MVCI. And then in 2019, he did it again, and he got third at final round, fifth at Nat Town Clutch. I don't know what that is, but I've never heard of that one. But that's probably I think that's in the South or something.
Yeah.
FOTW circuit finals. I don't know where. Oh, that's the Marvel community, Fated Two Worlds. Oh, Indiana. Thank you. No. Yeah, they had a Fated Two Worlds circuit as well, the community circuit at Combo Breaker, and he got third at CEO as well. And then like I even broke out in 2019. He also placed fourth at Evo, which is also worth breaking out in its own event. So like this dude just like trailblazed, and we barely talked about it on our podcast because we were talking about all these different things. I think we even talked about like
Yeah.
being Asian at some point, but we didn't
Yeah.
talk about this. And so like I just wanted to see if we could dedicate some of the show to just like how fucking strong his results were for those 2 years. Like he just kept that going. Wow.
We definitely have. I mean, yeah, our scene is full of top players in a lot of various games. Like I mentioned Latif. Street Fighter 4.
Mhm.
Um, we'll probably we'll talk a little bit about season 2, what we're looking at with that. But Angelic Armando being a top player at Marvel 3. You mentioned Nam here with Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. We got an Evo champion in the chat actually with the skills that kills for Power Rangers.
Yeah, best in
So
the world.
yeah, so we got a very and then we got a lot of people that have been top in Street Fighter games, whether it's OG games or even recent games with like Street Fighter Cross Tekken and things like that. So yeah, we got a definitely varied community. A lot of top players here.
We had King Hippo on, and he kind of gave us a little bit of extra insight on like some of the 3D
Oh,
folks, like Kinetic Clash and Soul Calibur getting Evo top eight. I think HKS, the Mortal Kombat, or is it Injustice or Mortal Kombat? NRS, but I think he either got top eight or was just shy of top eight for NRS at Evo.
yeah,
So like some big names, and hopefully we'll have them on the show. I do want to call attention to the fact that like yes, we know that Latif got second in 2011, and yes, that we know that Angelic got third at Evo twice throughout multiple years, and none of those are on this timeline because
yeah,
we are trying to focus on the ones that have occurred on our show, and so hopefully
yeah,
we can get some more insight from those folks in the future. Hint, hint.
yeah.
Um, okay, cool. So yeah, that was my second one was the big tourney results from Nam in 2018 and 2019. So how about you? What was your
Nice.
next event, Benny?
Well, my third final one was basically just going to be just Street Fighter Five. I mean, I feel like Street Fighter Five or Street Fighter Four revived our scene, and then uh, Street Fighter Five has been a kind of one of those polarizing games too. Like I think
Yeah,
right off the bat, it really kind of like we had a big. I want to say I think it was 61 people at the launch tournament, and the first two seasons were I felt like really big moments for the community as a whole. Because I mean, you were running like the boot camp things, like that's something that a lot of people think about. There's just in general, like I mean, it was part of the biggest Evo tournament, biggest Street Fighter tournament ever, or I think that's their biggest bracket ever. It was like that 5,000 plus,
mm-hmm.
at the first Evo for Street Fighter Five. I mean, for me, that one was memorable just because that was my first time getting out of pools after all the Evos that I'd been to.
That was
So
memorable for me too because I got a fan art from your daughter.
yeah, the fan art that was the first and only time my wife entered a tournament. She ended up on stream like on the first.
I saw that. It was at 8 a.m., right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, because you're the one that had to help her because I was like, I was in my pool at the same time I think, and I was just
yeah.
like, hey John, can you help her out? And like, she was all like, what do you mean I'm going to be on stream? And that was a pretty crazy thing for me just in terms of that just Street Fighter Five in general and like everything that's kind of come about from that.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, it, anybody who knows me like knows that Street Fighter Five is my favorite fighting game. And maybe Street Fighter Six will upset that throne or kick it off the throne or something. But like I completely relate. I think that the game. I've had a really complicated relationship with the game because I think I frequently end up taking the Capcom Defense Squad stance of like this is what like this sucks like there's a particular feature that's missing and it sucks that it's missing, but here's a couple reasons why maybe from the development side this could have happened, trying to have some sympathy, but there were some things that they really messed up in Street Fighter 5, and like stuff like the netcode being flawed, the launch being really bare bones, being it being a connected to server error constantly. The rootkit, the 8 frames of
Yeah,
lag. Even from a
yeah,
competitive standpoint, the balance wasn't enjoyable for a lot of people, and I can understand that. And I've argued with people about it over the years, but I understand it now. And Overall, I think of it as it kind of reminds me of Soul Calibur 3, where you follow up like this really like acclaimed sequel, and then you end up with a console exclusive game that ends up as the black sheep of the series. I think Street Fighter V is on track to be that in the future when we look back on it. Um, and I'm okay with that because if Street Fighter 6 is a a solid increment or iteration over that, and I mean iteration as in they actually improve on it, which
mhm.
every sign points to that, then I think Street Fighter 5 will be looked back on negatively, if anything. And I think I'm coming to terms with that. I think.
Hey, well, I mean, it's one of those things too. Because I mean, even with Street Fighter Five, like I think you in particular like don't exactly have the best I guess look back at Street Fighter Four, and like
Oh
for
yeah,
a lot of people like Street Fighter Four is they'll have love for that game regardless, just because like for me like that's when I entered the community. That's that kind of thing. Like um, so I don't know. It's like I don't. I guess it just I don't know where I'm going with this. It's just more like
everybody's got their favorite game, and like
yeah,
it's okay to have a favorite game, right?
yeah. It's okay for your favorite game not to be the one that everybody else likes, because like
Yeah,
it's like what we talked about with Street Fighter Three, right? It's a very polarizing thing with parries, and
yeah.
you can love that game and like not love the mechanics or whatever, like
And
that
what
kind
I
of situation.
Street Fighter Five is not just a game to me either. It's kind of an era where, like, I also think the game didn't get a fair shake a lot of times. I still take the Capcom Defense Squad sometimes here, and I do think that I hope that Street Fighter Six doesn't get that same response from the Street Fighter Five community. Um, I don't think it's going to happen. I think that we've kind of changed as a community since then, but that there's always a possibility there that people are just like, no, five is better than six. Fuck
Yeah,
six. You know,
there's
six is for
I was just gonna
scrubs.
say,
Yeah,
yeah, I was gonna say there's just oh that's just
yeah,
how it's just cyclical, right? Like
yeah,
people when four came out, the people that love two and three were just like, what kind of crap is this? Where you can FADC and make your dragon punches safe? This is bullshit. Like you got to commit, right?
yeah.
And then when five came out, it was the same thing. The people that love four or three or whatever didn't like certain things, and it's just I mean, I don't know. Me personally, like I've gotten to the point to where there's going to be, especially on Twitter, like Twitter could be the most toxic place to be. And it's just like you get the most extreme kind of takes from people. And it's just like
So
at this point, I've got to the point to where I kind of just zone people out or block, mute them, block them. I'm just like, you know what?
totally.
You're talking nonsense. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not even going to entertain the idea of like discussing this with you.
I think the number one red flag that I look for conversations like that are the moment someone says, "This isn't Street Fighter," because then they show their hand as incredibly ignorant. Because like I feel like every new game that we've talked about in this timeline episode, where we talked about Street Fighter 2 and how it was well received, and then we talked about Street Fighter 3 and how it bombed because it wasn't Street Fighter 2. We talked about Super Turbo and how it bombed in Arizona because it wasn't hyper fighting, and we talked about 4 because and how a lot of Third Strike's heads hated 4 because it wasn't Third Strike. And so I think everyone's starting to figure out that like no, there is no like definition of Street Fighter, and people are just picking and choosing the things that they liked at the beginning when they started playing that game. And for me, that's 5. I think for you, that's 4. I think for a lot of people, that's 4. A lot of people, that's 3. And some really old guys that happen to be on our podcast early on, it's 2. uh,
I always have love for two, man. I'll always go back and play that game or whenever I see it. Like it's the funniest thing. Like I go to like an arcade and I'll see a Street Fighter Two cap, and I'm just like, I gotta play at least one game on this or whatever.
yeah. So I went on a huge tangent. I'm going to bring us back because I have my last event, and then we can close out the show to talk about season 2.
Yeah.
My last event in this revival era, or modern era rather, this is the modern era, is the King Hippo publishes investigative findings on infiltration events, and that's shouldn't be
Ooh,
a huge surprise. That's a very spicy event. And in the same vein of what I was mentioning earlier about Team Hazmat, it's kind of like, um, how are we going to talk about that on the podcast out of the gates? You know, episode 2 or something. Like, there's no way that we were going to be ready to do that. And so we had to work our way up to it. And having Tanner on, he gave a wonderful interview to Ultra Chen prior to that, and so I was like, what are we gonna do if if we can't match that? But instead, it ended up being a really solid conversation, and more of like a bar chat. And he kind of King Hippo is a really inspirational figure in our scene because he doesn't fit the typical mold of TO or player or anything like that. Or I
yeah,
don't know of any other investigative journalists in our scene, in our local scene, and there are only a
yeah.
very few amount of them in the national scene, especially in the video game world.
Yeah,
So like it's
that's
an incredibly sensitive topic. It was going to be difficult for us to touch that without like really hypersensitive gloves, you know. Um, and I think King Hippo hit it out of the park when he came on our show, and I hope he comes back soon.
yeah. Oh man,
Cool.
like, yeah. This has been yeah. This like I didn't this is something that you were working on. Kind of I didn't even know so for you to kind of put this all together, like I said, like at the beginning of the show, like part of my inspiration for wanting to do this was to chronicle the history, and then for you to be like, "Hey, let's go work on." I was thinking about putting a website together, this and that, and then like you put this timeline together. I was just like, "Whoa, what?"
Yeah, I guess that's a good way
So
to kind of unveil that to our the public too, right? Is that this is a website. It's available on the internet. Do you
yeah,
want to? Should we wait? Let's hold until the end of the episode to give the URL out. But it
hey,
is going to be. Oh, should we do it now? Let's just do it now. Screw it. I'm excited. Um,
yeah.
so this the URL for this site is ag.spiralseries.com. I'll put that in the chat
Not
here.
GG.
Oh, sorry. Oh, ag.spiralseries.gg. Sorry. And I'll put that in the chat. It's super easy to memorize, in my opinion, as someone who's looked at it for, you know, 4 weeks now.
Like we said,
um,
I mean, this is obviously a work in progress. As we talk to people and as we, um, I guess, talk to people again, like have recurring guests, like things will get filled in, things will get uh, adjusted. The eras in itself can even be changed. Like this isn't anything where this like this is defining, like this is definitive, this is what it is.
yeah.
Like definitely a working document, working website. Something that's very fluid and something that we're planning to just update as we go.
Yeah.
Um,
I think a big thing is like, this first season of this podcast was us kind of establishing our identity. And I think this timeline kind of represents a goalpost for us where now we know like where our gaps are and where we want to like what guests we want to have on. Like, so, you know, right now there's very little NRS on here, but we've got some, right? And like we talked about Injustice and we talked about Mortal Kombat 9 with King Hippo, right? But then once Injustice 2 and Mortal Kombat X and XL come around, like we don't have a lot of representation there. So this timeline is a visual representation for us as well to be able to determine where we want to go next, like who we want to talk to next, what kind of subject matter we want to talk to next or talk about next, and that's coupled with your feedback too. So feel free to visit this site ag.spiralseries.gg and give us your feedback on it. That's another thing is to give us your feedback is for season 2. Again, we're going to be pushing our social media a lot more. We've got this beautiful thing that we're making, and like it's really fun to just make something, and it's going to be there for however long the internet exists. So what we want to do is get more people to see that stuff. And so like this next season, we're going to be focusing on growth. We've got the formula hammered out. We're gonna tweak the formula here and there, try some new things. I think our next episode we're gonna try something brand new. We'll talk about that shortly here. Um, but the idea is about growing the audience, and so we say it at the beginning of every episode of like we appreciate any likes and comments and subscribes and stuff. And I'm kind of asking you that earnestly right now as well. In that if you could share our podcast out to anybody and we can get as many listeners as we can, it would help us out as far as growing it and giving us an idea of what people want to hear, allowing us to see if there's a market even for any of this stuff. Like if there's like we might inspire other history podcasts, we might inspire other history people to come on and be guests, you know. So the more eyes that we and more eyes and ears that we reach, I think the better this experience gets for all of us. So yep.
Yeah, for
It,
season two, like we're probably looking at a mixture of recurring guests and then also having some new guests because obviously um, the recurring guests. I mean, there's definitely a lot to talk about with the people that we've talked to already. There's still, definitely still a lot that we could talk to about with them. Then with new guests, I mean, yeah, we definitely want to talk to some other people involved in other scenes, in other games, um, and to fill in more parts of the timeline and kind of like just the history and the stories of of AZ. The way it's typed out looks kind of weird because
I'm
that big
trying.
G's at the end.
I can't seem to get it. I can't seem to get it to not show to all show on one line. So ag.spiralseries.gg. For the folks listening, I can't do stream stuff. So I can't get it to work. Uh, but yeah, I'm really excited for season two. Again, like the big thing about calling this a season finale is that we wanted to look back and kind of debut this timeline. This is a pet project of mine. If anyone's interested on the engineering side, I can go on a whole spiel about how this uses AWS. But uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't think we really planned out the ending to this one very well. So we got to stick this landing here.
Well, no, I was just gonna say in terms of like season two, like I mean, we
Oh
talked
yeah,
about
yeah.
at the top of the show, like we are changing schedules to Tuesday, so the next episode is not gonna be next Thursday. It's gonna be this coming Tuesday, which is the what day is that? The 11th. Yeah, the 11th at we're gonna stick with the same time at 5 p.m.
Yep.
So Tuesdays at 5 p.m. going forward as of right now. Again, that's something that's fluid and like I mean we have changed things week to week just depending on whatever obligations we might have, but we do try to stick to that same weekly day so that people know like when they can tune in. Um,
We intend to keep
so
producing Drinkcast episodes as well. So like we do one-off episodes just on odd days that aren't even streamed. They just get published to the YouTube channel and the Spotify
yeah,
channel.
yeah. I
So
don't know if we talked about that, but that's something that we've discussed in terms of like maybe just having somebody along with us just to kind of just to talk, like not to have any kind of specific topic or interview style situation, just more to just kind of shoot the shit and whatnot, and just kind of talk about things.
I think another idea we had was having our wives on the episode and just talking about that
Yeah,
perspective. I think another idea we had was like dads and like what it's like to have a kid and be in the FGC, you know?
yeah,
So lots of fun perspectives we want to examine in season two. We're going to go a little bonkers, but it's a lot about growth. Also, I have
yeah.
a cat now too.
So yeah, so then finally, so our episode on Tuesday, we are planning on a couple guests. We're trying to see. I guess the whole thing was we were gonna talk about the Street Fighter Six beta, but considering it's kind of who knows who gets in or who's going to be playing. So it's kind of fluid at this point, but I think we'll still end up basically kind of discussing that at this point with who we had planned to talk to that day.
Yep. Is it worth? Do you want to unveil that, or should we hold that until
I
and keep it
can
a
unveil it. I
surprise?
mean, we were
Okay.
planning to talk to Saber and to Luke's balls to Scott and Jeff again, uh, kind of as a four-person panel. Like I had mentioned, I don't think I'm gonna have time to play the beta unless it's that Monday if they just happen to open it up and I can get some time in then. But I try to watch what clips I have. I haven't really kind of delved into things too deep like some of you guys have, but um,
Some of
you
you
know,
guys, as in me, I wrote an entire
yeah.
Google Doc on Chun Li, and I've written out all the B&B starters and meter optimizations.
Oh, I didn't know you were doing that already. Dang. Like I knew you were labbing stuff up and like looking things over. Like you were talking about like combos. Like I've just basically been
Yeah.
looking at what's his name? High Fights videos. Like the breakdown videos he does. I love those videos and like how he shows like what move it is and like
Hmm.
what he's doing, what they're doing here. Oh, this can cancel into this. So I've kind of just been looking at those kind of things here and there.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I've been. drinking it like water. As far as like the there's a lot of information out there, and so like basically this next episode is a chance for just us to gush about it. So whether we play the beta or not, which to be candid, it's very likely that at least 50% of the panel will be playing in the beta. So
Yeah.
we're gonna have some perspective there, but it's also just gonna be fun to theory craft, and we've done that on the side in group chats and stuff in the past, and it'll be nice to have that recorded out here, and then visit it in a time capsule later, like 6 years down the line, and be like, man, Street Fighter 6 was wild back then.
Yeah,
So,
before things get refined. But
yep, yep.
yeah, so pretty much uh just to recap, yeah, we're going forward. We'll be going on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. When we go live, you can catch us on twitch.tv/Spiral Series. When the VOD's available, youtube.com/Spiral Series. And then you can find us on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify under Absolute Guard. If you guys got any feedback or any comments, feel free to send them out on Twitter. It's absolute_guard. You can reply to any of the tweets that come out there or quote tweet it, whatever you want to do. If you have feedback in terms of like how we're running the show or potential guests that you'd like to be, we definitely have some people lined up. But I mean, I'm always open to talking to to see what you guys want to hear. So,
Sweet.
any last words from you, John?
Echo it. Like we want to grow, and so like, subscribe, share with your friends, and then see if you can give us some advice on what you'd want to hear, and we'll make it for you. So
Cool.
cool.
And then yeah, and then just finally, just the last thing, like if you want to check out the timeline, like John said, it's in the chat. But for those of you listening, it's AG like Absolute Guard .spiralseries.gg.
Cheers.
All
Alrighty.
right, John.
Thanks everybody. Take care. And recording stops.